gonna be murderers. Baby. Like, let's see, Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler.
No. And this is what do we call this? You know, when they record themselves, self-snitching. I mean, I don't know why people do this. It happens all the time.
That we should put a child in prison for the rest of his life.
Just because they killed somebody in a heinous and murderous and premeditated way? Oh, my God, just get a little therapy. We'll see you later. F that.
And there's just no easy way to tell you this. We do.
All right, now right there. Dad doesn't, sounds like Dad doesn't know at this point. Imagine that. You know, okay, would you have some weed on you? Okay, were you drinking and driving? Oh, did you get in a fight at school? We're going for a high death count. Give me a fucking break. The reason that they didn't do that is because they didn't think they were going to get caught, because they're playing a fucking video game in their mind. It's not real. It's fantasy, but it is real.
One individual would have gone to a school resource officer and said, "Hey, Brian Draper said these things." I think that would have been enough to scare me straight and be like, what am I doing? Like, I'm getting...
See, it's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else. Oh, if they would have just done that, I wouldn't have done this. Really? How about you just don't fucking kill people? What a concept. Just sounds like they were bored. They were bored with their mundane lives. And so they decided to just go fucking kill somebody.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer, coming to you on your personal time, and I really appreciate you guys watching. And our content genius today is lined up for us, asking the Scream killer 17 years later why he did what he did. Now, when you get into the mind of a killer, it is really, truly amazing. And that's why it's so fascinating. That's why this true crime stuff is something that everybody watches, because we just can't even imagine the train wreck that is in some people's brain. You know, like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or, Ed Gein. Some of the, the serial killers. Before we get to that, though, this is brought to you by eForms.com. eForms.com is a great repository, so you can go there, get some stuff done that you need to get done, and then you do it so you don't have to hire somebody like me, because I'm expensive. I'm really expensive. You can have a business agreement, any kind of power of attorney, landlord agreement. You can have a bill of sale. So like if you sold your car, for example, and you need these agreements, because let's say you sell your car to some dude, he doesn't change the title, and then all of a sudden racks up a bunch of tickets in your name. That's happened to me, actually. And so, but if you have a bill of sale, you're golden, because then you bring that over to the DMV, they take it out of your name, and all of a sudden he's on the hook for the tickets and you're not. So eForms.com is a very effective way to avoid guys like me and avoid paying high prices for something you can get done very, very cheaply and very quickly. So, all right, well, let's get right into this.
They were sick psychopaths do not get pleasure of killing other people.
That sounds good, baby.
We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream, except real life terms.
So that was largely what Tori brought into my life, was that movie Scream. I remember that I went to his house and he had this extensive DVD collection. I was like blown away by it, because I thought it was really interesting. He had all these DVDs, and so basically we started talking about Scream, and then we started talking about other movies, and then like the whole like.
A lot of times, you have killers or people who like to emulate things that are in the news. People, and I don't know why we as a society are so into true crime. I mean, true crime is huge. You've got channels just devoted to just that, which is kind of what we are in a sense. But we try to give you a little bit of a legal perspective. But you've also got, people who emulate these crimes in real life. The fascination with this stuff is just never ceases to amaze me.
Scream thing was just, kind of what we talked about, but it was more just like two kids in their favorite movie. It wasn't anything that was, serious or weird until like the very end of our friendship out there.
We're gonna be murderers, baby. Like, let's see, Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler.
No.
And keep in mind, these people that they're mentioning are not good people. Of course they're not. And this is what do we call this? When they record themselves? Self-snitching. I mean, I don't know why people do this. It happens all the time. I had a case where my client was, they did like 3 carjackings in a row. Really nice cars. By 9 a.m., they had 3 cars. And they put it all on Snapchat. I mean, I just don't understand why the people do this.
Zodiac killer.
Most people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
Just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm shit.
Why the fuck would you do? Number 1, why would you go kill Cassie? Number 2, why would you put it, why would you record yourself saying that? Number 3, go away.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
The clip you've just seen is taken from a series of homemade videos recorded by 2 16-year-old killers.
Let me tell you something about 16-year-old kids, especially 16-year-old guys. They lack perspective and they lack any kind of reality. When you have a child who's like a toddler, they don't really have a sense of permanency. They don't have a sense of tomorrow. They don't, and they're dangerous. So you got to watch them wherever they go. But they're easy to watch because you can see them in front of you, right? Well, when you have a 16-year-old fuckhead like this guy, or any 16-year-old, they go out into the world and they get behind an automobile. They do this, they do that. They don't have perspective to generally make good decisions. Although being murderous isn't like one of those things that you hope your kid doesn't cross, because you hope your kid's grown up with a little bit more sense than these fuckheads.
Just moments before the camera started rolling, they brutally murdered their friend and classmate, 16-year-old Cassie Stoddart.
Oh, hello, Cassie.
All for nothing. For just nothing. How sad. How just absolutely horrific. And they get rid of their own lives in the process.
I'm getting you on tape, okay? Say hi, please. Yeah, see ya.
Brian Draper, one half of the infamous murder duo from Pocatello, Idaho, now 33 years old, is serving a life sentence for his crimes and has agreed to an exclusive interview with Ewu. While Tori Adamczyk,
All for nothing. For nothing. Not because they're pissed at her, not because she rejected him in high school or whatever. Just fucking because. Just because they can.
the other half of the duo, never responded to our queries. Brian was willing to speak with us in an exclusive interview 17 years after Cassie's murder.
And in a way, I kind of don't like this, because what it does is it glorifies him. It gives him, this is why I did this to begin with. But he's in prison.
I would love the opportunity to experience life in society again when I lost everything. And I hate that, another person had to lose their life. But it's created a person in me that I never thought I could ever, achieve. And
It's tragic that, why don't you say it's tragic that I fucking murdered somebody for no good reason?
really hope that, I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life. I really hope that at the end of my life I can say, hey, man, I did something horrible when I was 16 years old, but I tried as hard as I could for as long as I could to live a good life.
The following interview has been analyzed by a qualified team, including a licensed professional counselor and a former detective, former licensed polygraph examiner, and former hostage negotiation commander and instructor. To get Brian comfortable talking to us, we started with the basics of his background, asking him about his early childhood and how he ended up living in Pocatello.
So let's talk a little bit about being a 16-year-old charged with a capital offense, or an offense that carries with it like a life term. Generally speaking, there's a limit on how low you can go for a life sentence. And 14 is probably the lower limit. So if you're 15, 16, 17, life is on the table. And in some states, usually southern states, even the death penalty. The mindset of a child, and at 16, you're still a freaking child. But most children are not murderers. And this gets me. But So when you're charged at 16, you have to go through a process called certification. So they certify you as an adult, so they can give you an adult sentence. And on a case like this, it's usually a crime of violence or a crime that would normally be a prison sentence for an adult. Those are presumptive certification. You would have a whole trial on that issue.
Basically, I grew up in white Mormon suburbia. I live in Sandy, Utah, and then I moved to Pocatello, Idaho when I believe I was 12 when we moved there. I lived an extremely sheltered life, and I was very limited in my experiences and all of that. So I grew up, and I was very I've always been a very private person. I enjoy my privacy. I enjoy being alone, but I had a really good childhood. I mean, I had good parents. My dad was always gone though. I was a kid, and so I didn't really have a good father figure growing up. It's not.
My dad beat the shit out of me growing up, and he was never around. He was a fireman, and he drove an ambulance. So he was 24 hours at the fire department, then go right from the fire department to his ambulance job. And so he was worked 80 to 100 hours a week, easy, and I never saw him. But guess what? I never thought about fucking killing somebody. Ugh.
My dad wasn't a good dad. He was a great dad, and I love him, but he was always gone. And so I was largely raised by just my mother, and she was busy all the time and stretched thin, so I was largely a latchkey kid, I believe is what they call it. Kind of came home, I was alone, I kind of ate alone, and so that's kind of how my life was growing up. But we moved to Pocatello when I was 12 or 13, and I think the transition into junior high school and high school is where things started to kind of fall apart, and it really exposed all of the gaps I had in my development and all my vulnerabilities.
See, he's deflecting responsibility by saying, I had gaps in my development, I had vulnerabilities, I'm just really misunderstood.
I think that's what really did it, is when you're a kid, you're, unlike elementary school, everything is very easy and simple, and as you get older, things get a lot more, complicated as your social network gets more complicated, and it really tore me up.
Social network gets more complicated. That's code for I was ostracized or I wasn't accepted the way I wanted to be accepted, and but it doesn't mean you need to fucking kill somebody.
And it kind of exposed all my difficulties and my vulnerabilities as I got older. I think that's largely how it started, is just that transition into adolescence.
We asked Brian what his relationship with his parents was like.
I mean, my mother is extremely affectionate, and she taught me to be affectionate as well. And she's very, kind, and everyone who meets her absolutely adores her. And I love her to death, man. She's awesome. She's a great person. But I think, she was busy all the time. She was stressed out, and so I don't want to speak ill of my mother because I love my mother with all my heart, and she did the best she could. But there's a lot.
What would you do? I mean, think about that. Your son or daughter is in prison for heinous, senseless murders for the rest of their life. Would you continue to go see them? It's a hard question to answer because they're going to be in there a long fucking time. And would you take their phone calls? Would you pay for their commissary? There's all kinds of decisions you'd have to think about. Or would you just abandon them and say, fuck you. You've led your life down this path. See you later. Would you do that? It'd be hard. Think about that. That's a hard question to answer. Some people have a knee-jerk reaction, blah, 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 I do this. But it's hard when you're got a family member that you really care about, like a child, and they fucked up this bad. How do you support them? Or do you? Hi, just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Step 1. Step 1 underwear is high performance underwear. Let me just tell you, when I'm on the ski slopes or if I'm on my bike, I'm just telling you, it is comfortable. I don't even know I'm wearing them. And when I'm on the golf course, I'm walking down, and I got these Step 1s on. And guess what? They've got a Lycra panel, so there's no chafing going on. They keep everything right where they're supposed to be. They're made of a viscose material, which is derived from organic bamboo. What does that mean? That means you don't sweat. Go get some of these. Try a few pair out. If you do that, when you go to the checkout, you get 25% off. That's just only for my subscribers. You put Bruce Rivers in the promo code section, so you get 25% off. And guess what? It's a no-risk proposition to you because if you don't like them within 30 days, you get your money back. But I love them. I love them. I love them. You will too. Step one, get some.
There's lots of things that I could have learned and things that she could have done differently. But, like, that's every parent, right? I think that largely...
That's just bullshit. I mean, that's just deflecting responsibility.
Largely, I had a good family, and I was treated right. And I was actually adopted, but I was adopted at birth.
He was adopted. You know, there are theories about adoption and about children who are adopted who wind up getting attachment disorder, you know, and they have a disassociation with their families. I mean, it's not every adoption by any means, but I know it does happen.
And so the Draper family has always been like my family. The highlight of my childhood is when my dad came home. I was able to hang out with him. So,
the Draper family. See how he just kind of disassociates a little bit?
but yeah, that's my mom and dad were. They always fought. You know, they were never really affectionate with each other. They tried, but yeah. And my sister, I have a sister who's she's 30 now. Her name's Tiffany. She was like 12 when I was arrested, so she's really growing up. But we were really close, and I love my sister. And you know, the commonplace stuff of kids and their siblings fighting and arguing is it's pretty normal stuff.
Brian is quick to mention an absent father and describes his mother as doing the best she could, even though she made mistakes. This may mean that he's trying to appear as though he's not blaming his parents, while at the same time leaving us to draw our own conclusions that they created an environment leading to him being too sheltered. It's possible that in his mind this is true, or it could be seen as an attempt at manipulation. What Brian says here about his sister Tiffany eerily echoes what Andrew Stoddard said about his sister Cassie in an interview given in 2016. He stated, "Me and her were always into the same stuff and going to the same places. We did everything together even though we would argue and stuff, just like any other sibling. I just miss having my sister right there, a grade above me. I felt like I was always a step behind her looking up to her. She really was a role model. She was really smart, doing good, and had a lot going for her." We asked Brian if he always knew he was adopted.
No, I didn't. So basically, when I was 10 years old, my mom actually took me out to lunch, and she told me that I came from a different mommy, is how she said it. And so I didn't even know what that meant exactly. She said that while I was in heaven, I chose her instead of my biological mother. And so...
Okay, that's one way to tell him. But, when you have a family, we're all like part of each other, right? Like my son, I always got to kind of know where he is and what he's doing. And, like you hear that the young man talk about his sister and how she's part of him and misses her being right there. And when somebody senselessly takes that away, it's such a fuck job, whether it's that or a suicide. It really is difficult to square that.
I thought, okay, so you're my mom. So all I knew about my biological mother was that she was only 13 when she had me, and her name was, and that's all I knew. So basically, when I was arrested, I got this letter from the, and automatically I thought, oh my God, this is her. And we had like a correspondence for a while, and then she disappeared again. But I had a very brief relationship with her after I was arrested.
Our next questions delved into how Brian met Tori and their relationship. Notice how Brian references Cassie in this section, as it's the one and only time he refers to her specifically in this interview.
So I only met Tori. I knew Tori for a couple months, basically. So that's at the very end of my time on the outside is when I met Tori. So I met him. It was sophomore year in high school biology class, and it was fifth hour. And I wasn't his friend at first. When I first met him, I didn't like him. He was very arrogant, and I thought he was like a popular kid, so I didn't really have a connection to him at first, and he was mean.
So when you represent somebody who is 16 years old, charged with a crime like this, you're going to get one of two different types of people. You're either going to get somebody who is brash and deflecting responsibility and doesn't give a shit, or you're going to get somebody who's simpering and whining and crying. The simpering, the whining, the crying person is so much easier to deal with than the other type. It's very difficult to deal with somebody that's narcissistic, doesn't take responsibility, doesn't listen to anything you have to say. Very, very hard to represent people like that.
Ironically enough, he was mean to me, so we didn't have a connection for the first, I don't know, half of that year. What brought us together was we had an assignment in biology class, and we were assigned into groups, and the greatest irony of all of this, I think, is that I was assigned to a table with my victim and with Tori at the same time, and we were all like friends, and that's how we became friends. Is we all started talking to each other and like laughing and joking around. So all three of us, and then her friend was there too, and that's how we got a connection.
According to our team, this phrasing, in addition to being an unsettling way to refer to Cassie, is a red flag in that, generally speaking, we tend to refer to the most meaningful people first in a conversation. Here, Brian introduces Cassie as my victim, and then Tori, almost as though he was already seeing Cassie as his victim as far.
When you think about it, my victim is a way to disassociate, and the Draper family, another way to disassociate, and that's probably his coping mechanism.
Back as that lab assignment. It also completely erases her identity and allows him to distance himself from her as a person. Brian also seems to have a hard time keeping his answers straight and often provides contradictory answers. For example, though he just finished explaining how he initially didn't like Tori, he almost immediately goes on to say this.
I don't know what drew me to him immediately. I think it was more just, I kind of felt like he was cool. And when you're a kid, like everything that is important is cool. He was cool. I thought he was cool, how he talked, how he acted, how many movies he had. I just thought he was a cool dude. And I thought he had a whole bunch of friends. He told me he had tons of friends and that he was popular. And so I felt like if I hung out with him, I could be popular. I could be popular at my school. He could get me involved with other people. But after the fact, I realized that was all a lie. Like, he wasn't popular. He didn't have a lot of friends. But he told me he did. I think that's what drew me to him.
He also goes on to clarify that he and Tori didn't discuss anything beyond movies, despite the hours of footage they shot speaking of other interests. It's unclear if Brian has simply forgotten the footage, or if he doesn't know how much was released to the public after the trial.
That's what he got me into movies, and that's all we talked about. That was it. We didn't talk about girls. We didn't talk about our futures. We talked about movies. That was the extent of our friendship.
We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream, except real life terms.
My other network of friends kind of.
Why would you do that? Because you're bored? Why would you take a life to... when you think about the Columbine shooting and other shootings like that, it's just snuffing out life for the sake of snuffing out life, to exchange your life for theirs. And I don't know if they thought they were going to get away with it, but to actually go through with it, it's just chilling that somebody would have that cold of a heart.
Superior in a way, because I was hanging out with Tori all the time. Like I said, we didn't have intense conversations about life and what we wanted out of life. It was all movies. That was it.
You're evil.
Yes, I am. So are you.
No, evil is an expression of God. That was another test you failed.
Evil is not an expression of God.
Yes, it is.
Bullshit, you know it.
Evil, the origin, is a follower of fucking Satan.
There is no Satan.
Real? Then shut up.
Then how are we supposed to express ourselves?
Good and bad.
We're bad.
We're bad.
That sounds so shitty.
We're evil. That's not even shittier.
We're not, okay? They were sick psychopaths that get pleasure of killing other people.
Next, we asked him what kind of movies he watched with Tori.
Prior to meeting Tori, I didn't have any DVDs that were horror movies. I didn't have any horror movies because I wasn't allowed to have horror movies. So I didn't have any of that stuff in my house.
Taken shortly after.
Yeah, so growing up, I never let Michael have either, first-person shooter games or, Call of Duty or anything like that. Just for this reason, I guess.
These crime scene photos of Brian's room show wall-to-wall horror movie posters, and a large DVD collection complete with dozens of horror movie titles. Either the statement he just gave is a lie, or he's claiming that in the apparent couple months he hung out with Tori before they murdered Cassie, he amassed this entire collection without his parents knowing.
But he got me into that stuff. I mean, I had known about it, as a kid, and I was kind of thought it was cool to watch Friday the 13th. I thought it was a cool movie. I saw it on TV, of course, DVD. But so, I kind of thought they were cool movies. And so but I didn't know anything about Scream or anything. And so that was largely what Tori brought into my life, was that movie Scream. And so I remember that I went to his house, and he had this extensive DVD collection. I was like blown away by it because I thought it was really interesting. He had all these DVDs. And so basically we started talking about Scream, and then we started talking about other movies. And then like the whole Scream thing was just, kind of what we talked about. But it was more just like two kids and their favorite movie. It wasn't anything that was, serious or weird until like the very end of our friendship out there. So it was, it's all just normal stuff. It gave us a chance to just, kind of escape into our own reality, I guess is how it started.
One of the many interesting answers Brian gave us was when we asked him if there were any red flags he was exhibiting that he thought other people could have noticed.
Oh, absolutely. So
Now, that's a trick question in a sense, because what do you think he's going to say? Because if he can find fault with somebody else, that sort of deflects the conversation as the fault within.
Absolutely. So basically, when I entered my junior year in high school, I completely copied the identity of a Columbine high school shooter. So I copied how they dressed, how they talked, what kind of music they listened to. I started smoking because I wanted to embody that image, because I thought that image would elicit attention from my classmates. I started wearing a trench coat, and all of these things were very clear that I was dressing differently, I was acting differently. And if you would have gone on to like chat rooms, I go into like chat rooms, and I guess I just I was looking for an identity, and that's the identity I was pushed to through rejection. And so
I was pushed to that identity through rejection. We all have rejection. I remember the ninth grade dance. I asked three young ladies. All three said no. And I had zero self-esteem. But just because you're rejected, just because you have, a shitty high school experience or whatever, it doesn't mean that you have to result in murder.
I guess that would be one of them, and then I'd always talk about it. I talked about it online on my MySpace profile, because this was in 2006. I talked about how my heroes were Eric and Dylan. So when there's a kid who says things like that, he's trying to impress people, and he's trying to show people that, hey, I'm like this too. I'm cool. I'm powerful. I can do something like this too. So respect me. And I think that,
How messed up is that way of thinking, honestly? And when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with somebody who's just a sociopath, honestly. They don't give a shit about other people. And so, think about it. I'm just like Dylan Klebold. You should respect me. Who does that make any sense? That's the mind of a 16-year-old shithead.
all those things came into play, and they weren't talked about, So, but yeah, I could have absolutely, I think. And there's a lot of times where I said really dumb things in class that, I think if one individual would have gone to a school resource officer and said, hey, Brian Draper said these things, I think that would have been enough to scare me straight and be like, what am I doing? Like, I'm getting...
See, it's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else. Oh, if they would have just done that, I wouldn't have done this. Really? How about you just don't fucking kill people? What a concept.
Getting in serious trouble. This is stupid, but that never happened.
Brian's behavior was reported at least twice. Fellow students at his middle school reported that Brian and another student were planning a school shooting. They advised the school administration that Brian and the other student were obsessed with Columbine and were planning a similar attack. In one of the two reports, Brian was allegedly planning to bring a gun to the next school dance and had even mimicked shooting people at the previous dance. Brian was disciplined and referred for counseling and ended up switching to an alternative school. This is still a remarkable amount of focus on himself and how others could have stopped him from making his choices. While it's typical for teenagers to be more self-involved and narcissistic than other age groups, and while personality disorders are not typically diagnosed until after the age of 18, if certain traits are exaggerated in adolescence, this can be a red flag for a burgeoning personality disorder. Next, we asked why he was obsessed with the Columbine shooters.
I think largely it was trying to get noticed by my peers, and so I think when I entered junior high school and high school, I kind of got swallowed up in the environment where I didn't have a lot of friends, I didn't have a good social network, and I was...
Any attention is good attention, even if it's negative attention, some people think.
Further into the fringes, and that's when I remembered Columbine. I remember hearing about Columbine when I was younger, and I started going online and researching it, and this gave me, it was a very huge, extreme example of what a kid can do at his school to be noticed and be important. And so that's what...
To be noticed and important. You couldn't go get good grades and get on the honor society. You couldn't become an athlete and be accomplished there. No, I'm going to be recognized for being Dylan Klebold reincarnated and then kill somebody. Does that make sense to you?
Drew me to it at first, I believe, and then I kind of felt like I was part of a club because I was interested in these things for a reason. I'm part of this club. I'm part of these people. I'm an elite person. I'm strong. I'm powerful. I'm a man. And so I started, dressing like them. I started acting like them because I had no idea who Brian Draper was. And that's, unfortunately, I was pushed into that role, and it's my own fault. And that's why I related to it, is because I felt like they were like me, and they understood me when I didn't even know them, and they weren't even people anymore. They were dead. But in my mind, they were real on the screen. And so, I felt like a kinship with them.
And tell me that his parents just don't every day look back and say, what could I have done? What could I have done? What could I have done? But who thinks their kid's going to do this shit? But if you have any inkling that your kid's into, the Columbine shooting or into violence whatsoever, you got to act. And I'm not saying his parents are at fault here by any means, but you got to act.
It's one of those things that makes me frustrated now because of what they did and all the damage they caused. But when you're a kid, you don't really understand about the whole damage you're causing. You just understand it in terms of, is it cool? Can it get me noticed? And that's all you think about. That's it.
The use of statements such as, I'm an elite person, I'm strong, I'm powerful, indicate an obsession with being seen as an elite person, and also aligns with certain aspects of narcissistic personality disorder. Brian mentioned that he and Tori used to break into homes, and we asked him if the purpose of this was to scare people.
No, it was more like we'd go to a house and we'd drive around and we'd film and we would act like we were about to do this huge thing.
Hopefully we don't have to go to and I try to use
Yeah. We've probably tried maybe 10 times. They've never been on the road, so.
Well, when they have, their parents show up.
As long as we're patient,
We would do that for about 2 weeks. We were doing that. And I think the more we did that, the more crazy it got to where it was, well, how about we go into a house? And so then we actually went into a house once. I'm not going to say whose it was. We went into a house and then we left. We didn't do anything.
And we were patient and never getting paid off because I missed him so long. So we got it. I finally all worked out now. So
it was like a thing where it was just one step after another where it just became worse and worse and worse, where then all of a sudden we're in this other house and our friends are upstairs and we're in the basement, and then it's, oh my God, like we're actually doing a crime now. It's reality.
So he starts with burglary. The definition of burglary is breaking and entering of dwelling with the intention to commit a crime therein. And then it escalates from there.
Brian and Tori started with smaller scale crimes that they were easily able to get away with. It's not uncommon that someone will continue to escalate their behavior to test the limits of what they can and cannot get away with, and also as a way to desensitize themselves for bigger, riskier plans. With this in mind, we asked how and when the topic of murdering someone first came up.
Well, I mean, it seemed like it was very spontaneous, so we were skipping an assembly in junior year. So we were friends over the summer. That's when we became, like, friends, I guess, is during those 3 months. I spent every day with him, all day with him, and I neglected all my other friends. But so basically, we were skipping an orientation assembly, I believe, in junior year of high school, and we were hiding out in the bathroom because it was a requirement. You had to go to it. So we skipped it, and we were hiding out in the bathroom. We were kind of like mimicking, like, you know, the actual movie Scream, and he just, like, out of the blue said, "Brian, have you ever, like, thought about doing something actually, like, real?" At this point in my life, this is a very complicated issue, but at this point in my life, I have been, like, reading about the Columbine High School shooting, and so I had been delving into that. And so when he asked me that, I said, "Yeah, I've been, you know, I thought about Columbine for a while." And so, yeah, I have thought about that. And so that's when it started. And I mean, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. It's just where I was in the very vulnerable place in my life and so the worst actual possible thing that could have happened to me is meeting Tori. And I'm not blaming it on Tori.
I still haven't heard a justification for this behavior. I mean, he doesn't have any kind of diagnosis that would facilitate the murderous aspect of what we're talking about.
That was the actual tipping point that pushed all of this into reality instead of just stupid adolescent fantasy. It became reality, and that's because we came together at the worst possible time. And so, but that's what happened, and that was probably in August of 2006, I'd say. He just asked me, and then I said, "Yeah, I have thought about it." And then we started going to his house, and we put our own lives into a movie. And so we said, like, who are the characters? And so our characters were our friends. And so our friends were characters in the movie, and our classmates were.
Just sounds like they were bored. They were bored with their mundane lives. And so they decided to just go fucking kill somebody.
Characters, and that's how it all started, is we took, like, the movie Scream and we put it into our lives. It wasn't really real yet. It was like a fantasy. But that's how it started.
Ori, September 22nd, 2006. Skipping our 4th hour. We're writing our plan right now for tonight. It's gonna be cool. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Cassie's family.
Listen to how premeditated this is. And you know, the difference between premeditation and just intentional murder is that there's, malice aforethought. In other words, they think about it ahead of time and they're planning the murder. And look at this. This is so fucking chilling.
Yeah, number one. We have to stick with the plan. She's perfect, so she's gonna die. Time is 9:50. September 22nd, 2006. Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our 2 friends. And they are right in a house just down the street.
We have the grueling task of killing our friends. It just boggles my mind that they would just do this.
We just talked to them. We were there for an hour. But
We checked out the whole house. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I unlocked the back doors, so it's all locked. Now we just gotta wait. And we're really nervous right now, but we're ready.
we're listening to the greatest rock band
We've waited for
ever,
this for a long time.
Floyd, before we commit the ultimate crime of murder.
We waited for this for a long time.
A long time.
On Sunday, September 24th, 2006, the Contreras' 13-year-old daughter walked into the family living room and discovered the bloating and bloodied body of her cousin, Cassie Stoddart. Frank Contreras and his wife Allison, Cassie's uncle and aunt, had left the responsible 16-year-old to house sit for the weekend and never imagined the horrors that would take place the Friday night they left.
They're contemplating these murders, and while they're doing that, they're talking about the greatest rock band that ever. I mean, is that this lack of humanity, lack of And it's an aggravating factor when it comes to sentencing, but it's life without parole, regardless, because it's premeditated. But I just can't even imagine, how difficult it is to represent somebody like that. These are, if you're in a death penalty state, these are death penalty type cases.
Cassie had invited over her boyfriend Matt and 2 friends, Brian and Tori, to watch a movie together. Kill Bill Volume 2.
Well, that's a good movie for them to watch. Ugh, fuck.
When the boys arrived, they familiarized themselves with the layout of the house. The 4 teens then put on the movie and hung out in the living room until approximately 9:45, when Brian and Tori said they needed to leave. They left a door open and snuck back in, turning the power on and off to try to coax Matt and Cassie to come downstairs. When Matt's mother came to pick him up just a few minutes later, they offered to take Cassie with them. However, she decided to remain at the house to watch over the animals. Tori and Brian, after a prolonged bout of terrorizing Cassie, would don red and white masks and corner her in the Contreras' living room, stabbing her 29 times in the chest and neck.
We just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude,
To what end? I mean, the cruelty is just unfathomable. Look around you. Look around you, the people that you're with, and just be fucking kind. And the sociopathic nature of this is just astounding. A lot of times on a homicide, you'll have a lot of different kinds of factors. There's all different kinds of murder cases. There's manslaughter. There's murder 3 or depraved heart murder. There's unintentional murder. There's intentional murder. And then there's murder 1. So there's a wide variety. And there's also sometimes mitigating factors. So, for example, you weren't the aggressor and you probably had a chance to leave, and you were getting your ass kicked or whatever. Or it's a self-defense case. Or if it's a mercy killing. We've had those cases too, where a husband will murder the wife, but she's, only because she's advanced age and she's sick and suffering. And a lot of times those are murder-suicides, actually. But you don't see anything remotely, because you look for mitigating factors. There's nothing mitigating about this at all. Nothing. It's just cold.
oh, fuck. That felt like it wasn't real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the fuck up. We gotta get our act straight.
Look at that. They consumed a human being for an experience. That's really what they did. How deplorable is that?
The 13-year-old cousin who discovered Cassie's body would later develop depression, as did Frank and Allison. Frank said of their home, "We just never went back in that living room. It was our dream home, and it turned into a nightmare." Andrew Stoddard, Cassie's brother, says the tragedy affected the rest of the family about the same.
We're all ripples in a pond, right? You throw a pebble into the pond and you get ripples. We're all that to all our people. The people that you're with, the people that are around you. We're all that. That's what she was. So you take that out, take her out of the equation. Guess what? That ripple effect. It affects everybody in a negative way. When my wife committed suicide back in 2003, it affected everybody around it. It affected my son. It affected me. It affected everybody. And it was just tragic. Absolutely tragic. So just remember when you do something, when you get pissed off at somebody, you're affecting somebody. Take a chill pill. This kind of shit is so diabolical and so different.
We all had different things that bothered us. It took us years before we could even talk about it.
Just moving. I thought it was like this. I thought it was joking, yeah, it's a joke. They're trying to, he's trying to spot it or it's not fake at all. We have to kill her. I can't believe I did this. And he said, we have to kill her. And so we stabbed it out of the way. And it just kept, I heard it go in. I heard the chest, pound on the chest. It was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a joke.
They didn't sound like they were joking in the car, did they, when they recorded what they were going to do? Pretty stressful. Now he's in the fucking hot seat. And think about being that fucking parent. Think about being that parent of him for a second. I don't know what I'd do. You know, you'd want to be in that room, but do you really want to hear what happened? And then, but you know, he's 16. 16 years old. Fuck.
Next, we asked Brian if he ever discussed with Tori what they would do if they ever got caught.
Nope, I never talked about those things, never thought about those things.
We're going for a high death count.
We're not going.
We're going for a high death count. Give me a fucking break. The reason that they didn't do that is because they didn't think they were going to get caught, because they're playing a fucking video game in their mind. It's not real. You know, it's hard to, it's fantasy, but it is real.
Not to get caught, Brian. If we're going for guns, we're just gonna end it. We're just gonna grab the guns and get out of there, kill everybody, and leave.
We're going to make history. We're gonna make history.
For all you FBI agents watching, right? You weren't quick enough.
You weren't quick enough, and you weren't smart enough.
We are also taught that things like killing people and other thing is wrong. The only thing that it's wrong about is because it's breaking the law, and the law's only wrong. The law.
Natural selection, dude. Natural selection. That's all I gotta say.
There should be no law against killing people.
It's hard to believe that Brian and Tori didn't talk about what they would do if they were caught as an interrogation.
It's not that hard to think about because they're so wrapped up in fantasy. I mean, it shouldn't be illegal to kill people. I'm sure they love the movie fucking Purge. You seen the movie Purge? Give me a fucking break.
Both boys gave similar and rehearsed answers. They both initially told investigators that they left Cassie's house to go see a movie, obviously trying to set up an alibi. Of course, with movie tickets, eyewitness accounts placing them at the theater, and their matching statements, detectives would have to let Brian and Tori go, wouldn't they? But the wannabe serial killers were unable to provide them with any of that, and they didn't even have the foresight to look up a summary of the movie they claimed to have seen.
Where at? Is it the first theater? You guys turn and go in?
I remember.
Dumb shits. Just absolute, unmitigated dumb shits. And evil. Just evil dumb shits.
So what was the movie about? I mean, you watched most of the movie?
I don't know. Well, there's a girl there, and then I remember. You can't really exactly explain the movie.
When their first story fell through, the boys tried another lie.
So you're going to say that whatever Tori did this night, you did as well?
If with your cars, yeah.
No, I mean...
Yeah, Tori can tell us the same thing when we talk to him.
Yeah. I think he'll come clean to you about the movie.
So what was the purpose of...
One of the things they do is they'll ask him different questions and get him to admit to different things.
Parking there?
We were scoping the neighborhood
Why?
Because we were planning to go through cars.
When you say go through cars, what do you mean?
Oh, see the ones that are open, we don't go through any with alarms or that are locked. We just walk by, push the handle, and if it's open, we get in it and steal the gas money or change.
So have you done that before?
Once this year and in 9th grade.
We're gonna be murderers, baby. Like, let's see, Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler, the Zodiac Killer.
Most people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
I just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of assumed I was lost in the moment, and it was just more of a, like what people don't really know is that we have been doing this for about 2 or 3 weeks. We've been driving around, and we have been we've been going into some people's houses, and we've been doing these things for a while. There was no.
So think about that. You know, it's no different than any other types of crime where you dip your toe in the water a little bit. You dip your toe a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and all of a sudden, now you're wrapped into it, so you can't fucking make any other decisions other than go through with it. You know, a Ponzi scheme is very similar to this, you know. This just happens to be violating people's personal space, violating their their safe zones until the point where they actually kill somebody and are proud of it.
There was no death. There was no assaults. And so I had no reason to believe, truthfully, that this night would be any different than the other one.
That's the biggest crock of shit.
Something we wanted to know was if Brian thought he or Tori would have been capable of murder had either of them been acting alone.
I don't really know anything about Tori, and I still don't. I don't talk to him. I see him here, from time to time. When we're amicable, I'm not, rude to him. He's not rude to me, but we have a boundary where we don't talk to each other. We say hi, and that's it. I don't know. I've never talked to him about why he got involved with this. I've never talked to him about what drove him into something like this. I have no idea. He's as much of a black box to me as he probably is to you. But I know that absolutely, unequivocally, there's no way this would ever happen had I been alone. There's no way in hell this would have ever happened. And so, again, I'm not blaming it on him. But you have to understand the whole interplay between adolescents and trying to outdo each other and trying to be more cool. And so when you have two adolescent boys who are trying to outdo each other, it's, a crescendo goes into something terrible. And that's unfortunately what happened. And so, no, absolutely not. If had I not met Tori Adams, this would have never happened.
Outdoing somebody in the track field or on the baseball field or on the football field is one thing. Outdoing somebody in terms of murdering somebody, it's just not an excuse.
This answer does beg the question that if Brian wouldn't have committed this murder on his own, would his fantasies have played out in another way? It's quite possible that something more aligned with Columbine could have occurred. Next, we asked Brian if he thought watching horror movies influenced him, and if he believed he would have committed murder without watching them.
Well, I absolutely would not have dressed up in a costume and gone to a house with a knife. Yeah, I think kids actually follow templates of what's there before them. And so I think we see a lot of school shootings now because school shootings exist in the first place. I think kids are drawn to what other kids have done before, and so I think why I watched Scream, and I only watched Scream 1 because Scream 1 was set in high school. I was able to put my own life, I guess, into the movie and apply it to my life in a way that made me feel like I was significant.
You're significant. Do you see the lack of insight, the lack of tomorrow, the lack of being able to have some kind of perspective on consequences? Doesn't think about that at all because it's fantasy.
Had there been no Scream, then yeah, I think I would have probably been led down, a different path. But I don't think that movies cause any of these kinds of things. Obviously, I'm not a behavioral psychologist and I'm not a scientist, so I couldn't tell you exactly how it influences people. But I can tell you that it just gives you a template to what you can follow, and so that's what I can tell you. But I think largely it's it's kind of like cops and robbers in the old days when you're in the 50s.
Yeah.
Your kids were cowboys. They'd have cap guns, and they'd chase around the other friends with cap guns, and they would embody those movies that they watched. So I think that's kind of how it happened. You translate that into modern terms. I think that's what happened here. Is it was kind of like play. It was kind of posturing, and it just kind of got, like I said, it just it's a complicated interplay between us, and it came out as we were trying to outdo each other. And so it was an extreme to another extreme.
In Columbine, they made videos before they went and did this, and I guarantee you they watched those videos. Putting yourself into a movie or into a video game, especially when you're this young, you don't have any kind of a reality because your life is wrapped up in high school, and it's wrapped up in really fantasy. For very few people get so wrapped up into it though that they do something like this, and when they do, they destroy everything in their wake, including their own lives.
Until the extreme, became what happened that night.
Notice how much Brian is stuttering on this answer. And the large spaces here, the deflection to I'm not a behavioral psychologist. He doesn't seem to want to answer the question. He's not willing to blame it on the movie, but doesn't seem to want to take full accountability for his actions.
Like that would be number one, is just meet new people. Like, we close ourselves off to so much that we miss out on so much opportunity. And so I had so many times that I could have hung out with new friends, and I could have tried new activities, and I didn't, because I was so comfortable being miserable, and I got envious of everybody else around me because they had girlfriends. Why can't I have a girlfriend? Well, I didn't have a girlfriend because I was too afraid to go out there and take chances.
Everybody's too afraid to get out there. You know, I told you my experience asking girls to dance, to dances. I had the worst luck of anybody on the fucking planet. I didn't kill anybody. And he didn't have any problems making friends with Cassie. She invited him to her house. You know, it defies logic.
And take chances and talk to girls, and you might get rejected. So what? That's life, buddy. So I wish I could just go back and tell myself, dude, live your life, step out of your comfort zone, and take some chances.
Not don't kill Cassie, but stop being a weirdo. It's also
stop being homicidal. How about that? Fuck.
It's also important to point out here that one of the motives mentioned during Brian's trial was that he had an unrequited crush on Cassie Stoddart, and that was why he selected her and her boyfriend. Our next few questions focused on Tori, as he'd been moved to the same correctional facility as Brian. We also asked whether Brian wanted to comment on the book Tori's mother had written. The book, titled The Guilty Innocent, is a take on Tori's role in the crime as being a, quote, completely non-willing and passive innocent party.
One of the things that parents or family members, they can't imagine that their child would be guilty of, especially something this heinous. And so I see this all the time in my practice where, he really didn't, they minimize, they rationalize, they are in denial. And you saw the video. You saw the video of the planning and the joy. That's what kills me, is the absolute exuberance. They talk about the reputation they're going to have as fucking killers and liken themselves to serial killers. What the hell? Ugh.
In her book, Tori's mother wrote, I asked to see Tori, and Sean and I were led back to the room where he had been interviewed. There he was, my baby, alone, scared, terrified.
The victim. Give me a fucking break.
Dad, I think we owe it to you at this point to find out what we know at this point. Yeah. And there's just no easy way to tell you this. We do.
All right, now right there, sounds like Dad doesn't know at this point. Fuck. Imagine that. Okay, would you have some weed on you? Okay, were you drinking and driving? Oh, did you get in a fight at school?
That Tori and Brian have gone back in the house, okay? We do know that they murdered Cassie.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart.
What? I mean, imagine the shock as a parent. He murdered somebody? I mean, fucking A. It would just blow your mind. And you just want to fucking murder your kid for doing something like that. You don't want to murder your kid ever, but there's evidence that they did this together. And guess what? If there's also a thing called aiding and abetting in the law. Even if you weren't going to plunge the knife into the chest of the person that died, if you are aiding, advising, counseling, conspiring, or otherwise encouraging somebody to commit a crime, you're just as guilty of that crime as the person who actually did the plunging of the knife. So, and you hear him on this video. Here, let's replay part of this. And I just went back 5 seconds. And you hear him on this video just with glee about what they're going to do.
You know that they murdered Cassie.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddart. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get?
The exuberance, the excitement, and it just defies logic.
I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah.
I think where we're different is I was trying to be something I wasn't, and he was trying to have the courage to be who he was. That's what I think it was. And that's why I have remorse, is because I was stepping into a world that I didn't understand or want, but I thought that I did because I wanted to be noticed by my peers and I wanted to feel important. And it has nothing to do with wanting to be famous. Everyone thinks I want to be famous. That has nothing to do with it.
We're going to make history.
I've always wanted.
I'm horny just thinking about it. I'm horny just thinking about it. The callousness, the absolute lack of humanity is staggering. You know, empathy is something that you feel in your heart. You know, when somebody is suffering, you kind of feel suffering too. The lack of empathy they had for their victim is just so disheartening.
I've learned, I've loved, you know, and I've made it through it. And I wish so badly that it didn't have to take, you know, a person dying for me to actually understand that, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? But I had to learn the hardest way possible, and I lost everything. And I hate that, like, another person had to lose their life. But
another person did not have to lose their life. You know, it would be so hard when you think about it to be his parent. But sometimes you can't break that bond. But I would have if I knew my son, and I love my son, you guys know the content genius, I fucking love him like nobody else. And there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him. But I wouldn't help him cover up a crime. And I don't know that I would help him with the defense. I'd say you're kind of on your own. And I don't know that if he was guilty of such a heinous crime, if I would go see him. It would take a long time for me to get the gumption to deal with it, because I'm sure they didn't know that this was their kid.
I would want to believe that society would give children the opportunity to become adults and to receive treatment and to see where they're at after all that has happened. So with me, I spent about 10 years in prison myself, and I was in therapy, and all of that taught me that, like, that I was on the wrong track. And when I reached...
Gee, did you have to really go to fucking therapy to know that you're on the wrong track when you're driving down the road saying how you're going to fucking kill somebody? Well, I'm...
About 25 or 26 is when I really, really calmed down, and I started to have a very good idea of who I was. And at the time, I was reading a lot of books on adolescence, and that's actually around the time when adolescence ends. When I became an adult, I understood.
That's actually true. Especially the male brain doesn't really fully develop until like 25 or so. So, I mean, and that means developing, you know, good decisions and perspective.
Understood how much different the adolescent brain was to how I was now as an adult. And so I think that the best course of action is trying to educate kids before they commit crimes. But once that has happened, I don't know what the answer is. I don't want to believe that we should put a child in prison for the rest of his life.
Just because they killed somebody in a heinous and murderous and premeditated way? Oh, my God, just get a little therapy. We'll see you later. Fuck that.
Ask Brian if there was anything he wanted to say to you, the viewers.
Oh, man, that's really difficult. That's a big one because it's like I don't personally watch true crime. I don't understand
Gee, why does it bother you? Does it bother you to watch true crime?
the whole thing. So that's why I asked you. I wanted this to hopefully be something that's more educational and inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
It probably it won't be, but I appreciate you at least appeasing me a little bit. But I don't know. I think that we want to believe that all of us are so different, and I think that at our root, all of us are the same. And I think that
no, we're not. No, we're not all the same. Nobody, generally speaking, drives around thinking, oh, I'm going to go kill that person and become just like Ted Bundy or the Hillside Strangler or give me a fucking break. Nobody does that. I mean, how many of your classmates are just the same with those murderous impulses? Nobody.
Yeah, the interplay of our DNA and our environment is what creates who we are as we get older, and I think that it's easy for kids to go astray if they're not taught the right things, if they're not exposed to the right things.
How about an internal voice? An internal voice that says, "I shall not kill." Try that one.
And you kill her.
Do it.
Overall, Brian seems to know how to sound remorseful, but does not seem to truly understand why he should be remorseful. He comes off as someone who is remorseful for a mistake he made as a 16-year-old that cost him his freedom, but isn't actually remorseful for taking the life of Cassie Stoddart and the pain he caused her family and community. In 2016, a case was heard in the Supreme Court that led to the review of 1,500 cases of juvenile sentencing nationwide, Brian's and Tori's among them. Whether or not this means Brian is destined for an early release is still unknown at this time, and whether he deserves to stay in prison for life is something we'll let you decide. As for Cassie's death, her brother Andrew Stoddart put it best when he said, "It's still a huge part of me. For me, every month of September is one I struggle to get through. It comes in waves, honestly. There's days when I'm fine and others I'll just crumble. We love her. It's always going to be a part of us. Nobody should ever have to go through this."
Nobody should ever have to go through this, which is 100% right. They consumed the human body. You know, they basically, for their own thrill kill, as Explore With Us has talked about here. And, you know, gratuitous violence, gratuitous consuming, whether it's a criminal sexual conduct type of case on a child, or if it's a murder like this, it's just your own thrill in the moment at somebody else's expense. And depending upon how the grave nature of what we're dealing with, it just has an impact on everybody around that person and you yourself. Now, I'm not really talking to people in my audience thinking that you guys are murderous people, because you're not. 99.9999% of people would never do anything like this, but there are people out there who will. And they're very difficult to represent. I've had a few of these in my day. And, you know, the lack of connection to humanity is really astounding when you see it up close. And they're very difficult people to represent. They're just almost impossible, because you can't do anything right and they didn't do anything wrong. This has been our reaction to asking the Scream Killer 17 years later, Mr. Draper, why he did what he did. And it was a video put out by Explore With Us, which is, give them some love, because they do some pretty good work over there. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer, with our content genius, Michael Rivers. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, and do me a favor, be kind to everybody around you. Be that force of good. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, police is at my god.